mountain conditioning for the bulk of those years. I think it's 16 years now. It started with actually a recommendation to one of my personal training clients, and it started slow, but then quickly developed a big following, and it's had a loyal following for many years. And I take a lot of pride in the class. It's probably the most fun I have in my job all week. I'm fortunate to have a job where I get to share health and fitness with people on a daily basis, managing our personal training team and our fitness specialist team. But then personally, I love climbing. I love trail running, taking my kids out skiing and hiking and backpacking and doing some rock climbing here and there. My passion is really helping people get out there as well and do that. And so, I mean, I've climbed all the volcanoes in Washington a couple times each, actually skied down several of them, at least most of the down of it. And I'm looking forward to continuing to do that for as many years as I possibly can. Being in the mountains is just a healing thing for me. So it's what I love to be, or where I love to be, I should say, not what I love to be.
Yeah, and when he talks about he skis down, on the up, he just runs up.
No, that's not true. I'm a diesel. I just keep going and going and going. I try to be consistent, but yeah. I keep a pretty good clip, but it's all relative. Like there's people that I see, and for instance, a guide I was with last January, and there's an article on this ski descent he just did, and like, holy cats, up in Revelstoke, and like it just next, it's like beyond me. It's another species of human, it seems like, but it's all relative. Everybody works with whatever they've got and can always improve too.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's those on one side, and on the other hand, there's people like me who had never hiked before, right? Start from scratch. And that's the whole point of today's discussion, Carl, because with COVID, what's happening is, yes, there are avid outdoors people who are getting outside more and more for the lack of other means of recreation, but also people who had never done outdoor activities, never hiked before, are increasingly now getting outside and exploring the outdoors and starting slow. And I thought, people can benefit from how to get into, that state of physical fitness gradually, obviously, to be able to do some of the harder hikes, explore more, and even climb your first mountain, right? Because it's totally doable. And that was a whole reason for bringing you here today. So I think with that context, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started with our conversation today. But yeah, thanks so much for coming here. And I know how popular the mountain conditioning class is. I attended it myself. And there's people who come to this class who've been coming from day one since the last 12 years without missing, a day. That's how it's like, yeah, it's like a cult.
A small one.
A little bit of housekeeping, guys. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat, and we'll either pause in between and feed those questions through to Carl if we are taking breaks. But depending on how we're doing on time, we will try to park them mostly towards the end and answer these questions. So please feel free and type your questions in the chat, and we'll attempt to answer as many as we can towards the end. With that, Carl, I think my first question is going to be, just like we were talking about, everybody can get outside, everybody can hike, right? If you can walk, you can hike, and everybody can climb as well. You don't need like an Olympian's fitness to start with, even if you want to climb something like Mount Rainier. So before just talking about where do people start and what kind of plans you would give them, why should people even consider getting outside? Why couldn't they just watch TV the whole day or play video games? Why would you even recommend considering hiking or climbing?
Well, quite frankly, nature is healing. Historically, we were out and living in caves and whatnot as humans, but the thing that we were speaking earlier offline, one of the things that came up in my mind is like it's called in Japanese, hope we pronounce it correctly, Shinrin Yoku, which is forest bathing. And it's actually a therapy that is recommended specifically in Japan, but it's gaining traction. And that can be a simple walk in like neighborhood park type situation, but just being out and being in nature, and that and just listening and being out in nature can help with stress levels. And right now, everybody is stressed for sure in some way, or suffering from COVID fatigue, and going out and taking a mile walk around a pond, as simple as that, in nature, trees around, or whatever environment you live in, can just help reduce your stress and anxiety and make you feel better, along with the motion of walking or hiking, where you're going to gain that some level of fitness and just open up your arteries and let your blood flow. It's just going to be healing in some simple way. So that's, I mean, the most basic level. I always think of that nature bathing. And I looked up an article today, and it's a meta-analysis, and it had 497 articles just on this concept. So it's not like a little niche thing. It's very heavily studied, and there's a lot of benefit to nature bathing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't know the science behind it. For me, I just experienced it personally firsthand because, yeah, when I stopped nursing my son, when he turned 1, and that's when I was just so out of shape, no body strength, no stamina. And that's when I was so, had all this baby weight, and also was faced with postpartum depression. And that's when I started hiking, just like, and I couldn't hike more than 1 flat mile without going out of breath. But I kept at it every single week, and it wasn't just amazing physically. Obviously you have to be consistent and, you know, at it, but sure, also mentally, oh my gosh, it just completely was transformational.
Oh, for myself as well, there's times where for whatever reason, life, I don't get out for whatever reason. And like, I might have these little bouts of outside, but I don't have a true, I do for time efficiency, I go for a lot more trail runs these days than hikes. And it's a slow up, but I'll grind on the up, but I'll have this underlying stress from work, home, whatever. I mean, I've got, I'm fortunate with a great family, but there's still, it's this pent up energy, and I'll go out for a run or whatnot, go up somewhere in the middle of nowhere, run for a few hours. I take my dog now that I have a dog, and he's great company, but come back and it's like I'm a different person. And one of my good friends had that same experience where him and I think at the time his fiance kind of he was just kind of a little tense and just I don't know, feisty, and just a little annoyed. And she was like in the same place, and he went out with me for a run and came back, and they had a conversation. So you're gonna have to do, like, this is, I think, just before they got married. So this is something you're gonna need to do in order to be sane. He's like, yeah, as if it wasn't in question. So it definitely helps that mental outlook for sure, and just how you feel. A lot of energy release and just decompression.
Totally, and more so during times like this.
For sure.
And it is just so stressful. Everybody's in a different place, and everybody has their own story, what's happening with their lives during COVID. So yeah, I think it's more important than ever. All right, so with that, I think let's talk about, most of us in the audience, Carl, are from the Washington state. So I'm going to say, what does it take for people to get from couch to Mount Si? I'm sure most people will understand Mount Si, but for those who are not from Washington, I'm talking about, a hike which is about 3,000 feet in elevation gain and about 4-ish miles. So I'm talking about a harder hike. So what does it take to go from couch to that?
That's a good question. And technically it depends, of course. But first off, just for AdventureTripr, as well as for myself and Pro Club, everybody's doing their exercise at their own risk. There's always risk of injury, especially out in trails and whatnot. So I assume everybody's accepting that risk and or for training. So be careful out there. But in general, beyond that, if I'm thinking of quote unquote average Joe or Jane, and depending on their fitness level, say they might want to lose 20 or 30 pounds in general, like yourself, you wanted to lose some weight after baby, it's been a year, and trying to get yourself in shape, and starting with exactly what you did with, a mile walk. I mean, that is a perfectly good place to start. And then building upon that, some things to look out for and be careful with is pavement. Pavement's really hard on the body. So if you have the option and ability to do different environments, where in this local area on the east side of Seattle, I mean, it might be going around Tradition Lake over by Tiger Mountain, where there's little ups and downs and some routes and stuff, but it's fairly benign hike, I think it's about 1.5 miles around, but doing something like that, and then building up from there to add activity every day. So simple thing of counting steps, whether it's a Fitbit or whatnot, and sometimes your phone, if you carry your phone most of the time, there's different health apps that will do that as well. So trying to get at least 5,000 steps a day is a good thing to try to pay attention to. Making sure you're like doing things, if you're right now, a lot of people are working from home, standing up and doing like in between meetings, stand up, walk around your house, walk like through every room in your house, or go outside and walk literally around your house or apartment complex or whatever it is around the block. Getting little activity throughout the day is going to be helpful. And you might think it's a small thing, but those small things add up. Adding in strength training is also something that's super important, and that can be different things. It can be really simple. You don't have to overcomplicate it, but doing some squats, doing some lunges, and a range of motion. You don't need to be perfect, but you want to do those things well. And if you're not really versed in strength training, hiring a trainer for a session or two just to get a basic routine is a great thing to do. A lot of gyms, which are starting to open. I mean, we're limited to 25% in Washington right now, which is better than not, and doing that with masks on. But you can get usually a free session at just about any gym, and just getting some basic exercises from a strength standpoint. Whole body, get some upper body, because upper body is involved as far as lifting up packs. Even if it's a light day pack, it's good to get that. Changing different ranges of motion and figuring things out for form. And then trying to get cardio in 3 to 4 days a week, whether that's building up from that 1 mile to 3 mile walk, and then starting to chip away at something like going to Mount Si, but you can do some preliminary hikes. West Tiger 3 is a good one. It's a little bit less strenuous than than Si. You could do the Tradition Lake, you could do Wallace Falls, some littler hikes, but still well populated where there's lots of people, so you could get through that. And then you could also literally chip away at Mount Si. Mount Si is heavily populated, so there's a lot of people, which to me is kind of a bummer, but it's a great thing to do, and it's a great accomplishment. You get a great view at the top. But you could there's mile markers. So first thing you do, like I'm gonna go out to Mount Si, I'm gonna hike the first mile and back. Great. Then, maybe a week or two later, hike the mile marker 2 and back. And then mile marker 3. And this mile marker 3 is an interesting one because you're 3/4 of the way there. And then the desire is going to be like, well, I should just go to the top, just do that now. And you may or may not be ready for that, depending on your fitness level. It might be perfectly fine. But that's also, it could be a good lesson from avoiding summit fever and just having that discipline. So it's like, nope, my plan today is to go to mile 3, turn around and come back. Yeah. And then the next time, go to the top and come back and enjoy that, get up to the bench. I generally don't recommend people doing the actual haystack because of the rock fall and falling danger. But going up, there's a little bench up there, and it's the kind of unofficial summit. So that'd be one great way to do it and chip away at it. And then you could do the little hikes too, like Little Si is a good accomplishment too, which starts out of the gate really steep. So it's kind of daunting, but then it kind of mellows out before the final little push as well. Yeah. So good option.
That's a great idea to do that same hike, whatever your target is, but do it mile by mile and take it gradually. And it's just so important to not have that summit fever and just have that discipline around it. That's a great point. So yeah, overall, in terms of absolute couch to the first tough hike that you're setting as your goal, at least 5,000 steps, Carl, you're saying, yes, and start with 1 to 3, might get to 3 miles, but also have some strength training and just get a session in, with a fitness coach to at least get an idea of what those, exercises look like, what is even strength training, and then follow those alongside, you said aerobic for like 2 to 3 days.
3 to 4, 3 to 4 days would be a good place to be. And for that 3 to 4 days, 20 to 60 minutes, and optimally that's 60, but minimally kind of that 20, which a 20-minute walk is at 3 miles an hour. It's gonna be 1 mile.
Perfect. Yeah. So, yeah. That sounds great. And you said avoid the pavement and hit these, trails and different type of variety. And you're saying that, I'm guessing, because of the hardness of the surface, which Correct. Is not easy get your muscles get used to walking, and it's easier to start with a softer surface, maybe even like feels like Marymore Park.
Absolutely, yeah. And like, you don't have to avoid all pavement. I just worry about somebody from kind of in a literal sense going from literal couch. I haven't done anything since, you know, high school gym class or whatever, to like 20 years later, oh yeah, I'm going to start walking 3 miles a day on concrete. You could end up with a musculoskeletal issue, whether it's plantar fasciitis or something. So having some variability, and even if you're walking outside or on a treadmill, for instance, changing the grade, little, like, okay, I'm going to go up 2%, then down to 1%, up to 5%, and just varying that, because that's going to put different stresses on your body. So you're not going to have that repetitive stress injury that could have that potential by doing always the same thing, always moving just straight ahead. People have a tendency to be linear, and then doing some change of direction. That's where that even simple little nature trail type walk will give you variability in the terrain. And then also just, you have to turn left, you have to turn right, your eyes are stimulated. There's different things going on, and it's good for you.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's a very important point, because yes, you might have this goal of being able to do a certain hike, but it's equally important to make sure you don't injure yourself in the process. You have to take it slow and mix it up. No, that is fantastic. And what would you have to say to somebody who's done mountainside and now wants to do Mount Rainier, or even Mount Baker, or, you know, one of the first mountains, Mount Adams is a great first mountain, or even Mount Helens, St. Helens during winter? What's your advice to those who are who've been hiking throughout 2020 and now are strong hikers, want to climb their first mountains? What's your recommendation for them?
You're definitely upping the ante with one of those mountains in view. So, I mean, everybody who lives in Seattle area, I mean, it's just a great day when the mountain is out, right? And you see Rainier, and it's this epic thing to look at. But also sometimes looking north, and you get it, or depending which direction you're looking. But I love seeing Mount Baker first, and Mount Baker is probably my favorite mountain of the volcanoes. Seeing out in the horizon to the north is just amazing. But there's an inherent risk with climbing mountains of that nature. So quite frankly, the first thing you need to do is look for whether it's a guide or getting some literal mentorship with some experienced individuals. And there's lots of different programs out there from the Mountaineers. I'm an intermediate graduate from the Mountaineers climbing program, which is one of the oldest climbing clubs in the area, and we literally wrote the book on mountaineering. So we being, just because I'm in the club, I didn't write it. But or Bow Alps, further south, Mizamas is another club a buddy of mine belongs to. So those are usually volunteer taught, but it's kind of a pay it forward type system. So as you learn, go through whatever the program consists of, then you start teaching, and by teaching, you learn those skills even better. There's also more of an heavily investment in equipment, but for somebody who's like, yeah, I think I want to do this, getting a guide, and that's a tough thing. Getting on guided trips is tough. We actually do, we team up with Alpine Ascents. We've done that several years ago. We did it like about 13 years ago for the first couple of times, and we took some of our members up, we trained them, and then took them up. And we're doing that again. We were going to do it in 2020. We did it in 2019 successfully, in 2018. And then 2020 had 2020 problems. So that got pushed to this year. So we'll be climbing with Alpine Ascents again in July, the end of July. But getting on one of those Alpine Ascents, Rainier Mountaineering Incorporated, and then what's the other one? International Mountain Guides are the three that are allowed to guide on Rainier as far as on major routes. But getting together with them, they also lead climbs on Baker and Olympus, all over the place. There's different things, and I don't like people getting too wrapped up in Rainier, because it's great, but there's something, it's much more of a churn as far as going up DC, Disappointment Cleaver route. It's tough. But there's such other great mountains. It's more of a remote alpine experience. So I don't dog the other mountains because they're not as high as Rainier. Rainier is still great, but think about those options. But then we got to get into training. Okay, so safety, you need to know, have some knowledge. But then training for it, we start progressing our hikes and progressing our cardio. That means intensity is going to go up. And then there's three big variables that we're going to work on in training as far as in our, it's volume of training overall. So more cardio, more strength training. Still probably just doing, 2 to 3 days of strength training is going to do it, but we're probably going to try to up the ante, maybe that duration of strength training from that 45 to 60 minutes in a session. And then also trying to work out minimally 5 days a week from a cardio standpoint. And there's different modalities that we're going to use in cardio, from cardiac output, which is lower intensity. Actually, I would say, they're boring workouts. You're just going to keep a steady heart rate. It's a great thing to, get into some show on Amazon, because I don't need you to be really focused. I just need you to go through the motions and work on developing your cardiac output. Cardiac output being how much blood your heart pumps with every beat. And if you're going too fast with like too high of intensity, you're gonna have diminishing return of the amount of blood your left ventricle pumps. So we have to slow down and work on that oxidative component, because it's famously said that mountaineering is long periods of boredom with brief moments of sheer terror. And so you need to have that long duration of just going through and continuing on. There's a huge mental aspect to climbing something like Rainier or Baker, or especially some of the, if you go to Glacier Peak, because it's a really long approach. You're in it for days usually, just because you're having a 17-mile approach just to get onto the mountain. But going back into the training activities, progression on your hikes, they're going to get harder. So we're going to go from things like Psi, which will be good training hikes still, up to mailbox or granite, depending on the season, the safety. Like, we have to be careful, especially this time of year. Avalanche conditions are something to be considering. I would tell nobody to go on Granite Mountain this time of year. It's just so avalanche prone. People die on that. So you got to be careful and be knowledgeable. But we're going to progress our distance, elevation gain, and the weight in our pack. So, and that's going to be a progression. If we're training, say, for Rainier for, say, 6 months to a year, depending on the person, you're going to have all sorts of opportunities to train, and you need to have that progression over time, and you have to have really that long-term vision and dedication. It takes some time to get there, and it can be done. We were talking, I mentioned a member of ours when we first trained for Rainier at Pro Club. As far as we were taking the members, he was an individual who, I think it was about a year and a half prior to him summiting Rainier, had a massive heart attack in Pro Club, and he's fortunate that there's a defibrillator and defibrillated him. And then a year and a half later, he had gotten himself in good enough shape that he's able to summit Rainier, and is a huge moment in his life. He also climbed most of Baker with us a couple years back, but he's getting older now. He's focused on grandkids, so didn't quite make the summit of Baker, but had a great experience. So it can really happen. You just have to be dedicated and figure out the specifics. And there's an art to that. It takes some time, but you just have to get in the cardio, strength, and then that variability in those long workouts. But once a week, a longer workout, I'd say. Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, no, that's it. I had my kid calling me out, and which is why I had to go mute for a while and here for a second. So yeah, no, I'm back now. And yeah, absolutely. In terms of, I think I'll go back touching on where you said you have all these great places like the Mountaineers where people can learn the skills. And unfortunately, in 2020, a lot of them were not running the programs. Sure. They're slowly starting gradually, but again, people will have their own discomfort levels in terms of, even in 2021, not everybody's vaccinated. So yeah, and which is why the idea is to kind of have this session today, so that we can give people tips to do stuff on their own. Right. We are trying to help people who are now still not comfortable going out in big groups and signing up for these programs due to COVID. There are people signing up through guiding companies, and typically with Alpine Ascents, RMI, IMG, what happens is you sign up, you get some tips tips or via email, but you just have to show up on the day of the, climb, or, but there's no sort of program to coach you and give you a plan to, try to take you through that. What we're trying to do through AdventureTripr, we have an AdventureTripr life group where people who signed up to climb these mountains through us, we kind of give them, a plan. We buddy them up with just their COVID circle, and they plan together. And we have people who are training to climb Mount Shuksan and Mount Baker through our guides that we work with, the smaller local guides who've done this for years, are great, but are really hard hit due to COVID. With that, in terms of training, it's a great point that you have to gradually take it up. And the three things that you mentioned is you've got to, I know you mentioned some of the hikes for people who are not from Washington. I'd just like to say the hikes that Carl was talking about, it was all about basically just taking a notch up in terms of the distance you're hiking, elevation, and the weight. And you consistently, gradually keep taking that one notch up till you get to, what is the ultimate benchmark, Carl, when you know you're ready for a mountain, or what are the benchmarks that people should work towards? And also that, and rest days. Maybe rest days we'll take, sorry, we'll take the rest days in the next question where we talk about a detailed plan. But just going back to the other question, if you can share some thoughts.
So benchmarks?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, there's a few benchmarks, and the historic norm is going back to Mount Si because it's the most common thing in the Seattle area. It's heavily accessible, it's safe. So it's like you mentioned before, 3,000 vertical feet from the trailhead to really the kind of false summit, which is, a matter of, 50 to 100 feet lower than the true summit. But, and then about 4 miles up, then 4 miles down. So the benchmark historically, and it's rough, but getting up from that in under 2 hours with approximately a 30 to 40 pound pack. So I'd say, you could say a 40-pound pack for males, I'd say 35-pound pack for females. And that's just because they're typically smaller, so their gear weighs a little bit less. Yeah. But then there's, smaller females that they're gonna I've met with a lady actually today who's quite small. And so she'll be packing a higher percentage of weight because there's just not that much difference between what she'd pack and somebody who is, 40 pounds heavier than her. Right. So it takes some effort. The other thing to think about is being able to go up roughly 1,000 feet per hour. And that's, a pretty good clip. And it depends on the grade, of course, on a hike, but you can ascend 1,000 feet per hour. And granted, I just said 1,000 feet per hour, and then we said 2 hours to get up Mount Si. So that's kind of a bare minimum, is that 1,000 feet per hour. So there's a couple of different standards you can look at. And you also want to do that with what we call in good style. So you don't want to be a junk show out there. So by all means, if anybody has on this call has any desire to put a portable speaker on the outside of their pack, that is a cardinal sin. There are earbuds if you want to listen to music. Try to get into the nature. Do not spoil it for everybody else. That's a little soapbox. I had to do that because it drives me crazy. So 1,000 feet per hour, Mount Si with a full pack, so to speak, 35 to, you can even say 45 pounds in under 2 hours is a great goal. And I forgot your other question.
We'll come back to that. We'll park that. It's premature for that question, because my next main question was going to be, if you were to give a training plan to somebody to go from couch to Mount Si again, what would that plan look like? Somebody who's never done it before is starting. Over what period of time would you recommend, and what should they be doing? You gave us a framework earlier, but in terms of days of week, and for how long should they be working towards it?
Of course, I said it depends too. It's relative to a person's starting point, but we're calling it average Joe, average Jane who hasn't been working out. I would say giving yourself, and this time of year is a great time to start thinking about it. So say right now, anybody listening to this or watching this, if you started training right now today, you should be able to be in shape to go to the summit of Mount Si, not the true summit, but the summit that probably by say May or June of this year, which would be a great time to be up there. You probably have little patches of snow here and there, maybe still hanging out, but it'd be easily could be done in that time. And so that would be, so starting out, like if you're starting to this week or next week, whatever you want to call it, 3 days, like we said, 3 to 4 days of cardio, and we're aiming for that 20 to 60 minutes. And that could be a progression. So if somebody's in a little bit less good or not as good a shape, starting with 20 minutes, and then the next week, go up to 30 minutes, and then next week, go to 40 minutes. And I also like to undulate. So undulate being, we're going up and down as we go in both volume and intensity. So we're getting, we have a harder week, then we kind of come off, go a little bit easier, come up a little higher than we were even before. And so we're going to work our way up, but then give ourselves some little bit of offloading. So in terms of things from like hiking standpoint, when I'm doing that, when I'm prescribing things, it might be, okay, we're going with just bare essentials in the pack to let's add a, 5 gallon, or not 5 gallon, not even five, like 5 pounds of water. So adding a little bit more weight. And then also with, I often have people pack weight up in the form of water. So my pro tip is that pack the water up and whatever you need to drink, but then extra water for weight. And you can dump it out of the top because your body doesn't need the extra impact coming down. There's plenty of impact that you're going to get on the way down on any hike, even if it's a mild hike, say, a couple hundred vertical feet. Those workouts, as far as what they consist of, it'd be great for even a beginner to start working on some intervals. And so say we're getting 4 workouts a week. And I'd love in general for 2 of those workouts to be a little bit higher intensity and doing some intervals. So if you're on a treadmill, step mill, bike, depending on what group people have, and they can do some workouts if they have a Peloton at home. There's probably gonna be some type of interval-based workout in there because there's gonna be variety in that workout, and there's so many of those. But having some higher intensity, lower intensity, so you're getting those different variabilities in intensity when you're working out. In general, if we had 2 of those a week, then 2 steady state, more of that moderate intensity. I was talking about the cardiac output workouts to just have that steady state, consistent workout. Because when you're out hiking, whether it's Mount Si or going for the bigger climbs, being consistent with your pace is the best way. It's kind of the tortoise and the hare, that steady pace wins the race versus I'm going really fast, then I'm done. I have to sit and take these long breaks. You want to be, there's a lot of efficiencies that build into mountaineering and even hiking. So if you're sitting and having a break for 15 minutes every hour, it's a long time. Having shorter breaks, enough to just recharge, grab that bar or some other food and some water, and then keep going is going to be helpful for you in your overall success ratio. So having that steady pace in cardio as well is going to be important. And sometimes that happens just in fitness in general too, where people, they want to start running, for example, and they go out of the gate way too fast. And then running all of a sudden is terrible. And so I stop after half a mile and I walk, then run too fast and I have to walk, versus trying to figure out the pace that you're able to sustain over time. And after a mile or so, if you're able to figure out that pace, your body's going to kind of shift into gear, so to speak, and you're going to feel better after that first 10 to 15 minutes of running. But you have to maintain that slower pace, but consistent pace in order to have success. Same thing with hiking, going uphill. So that's going to be something that's important in your progression of fitness.
I was making because I always did that when I started. I would try to go first,
and I do it too. I'm like, I'll tend to like, oh yeah, I feel really good, and then you feel great for that first little bit, and then you start hitting this like oxygen debt basically, and you're like, oh, it gets difficult. So you need to be careful of that. Yeah. Jumping into strength training, and there's a 1,000,001 strength exercises we can do and the combinations thereof, which is great, but keeping it simple is good. So the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. Starting out, again, beginner, 1 set of I usually have people who are beginner in that 10 to 15 rep range. So a little bit more on the endurance side of things versus when you're doing strength training, lower reps are meant typically for power development. And then as you kind of build up, historically, it's thought of that you're going to go into hypertrophy, then endurance. There's a little bit of different opinions of that these days, but basically still that 10 to 15 rep range for, say you're doing some squats or lunges. You're going to do upper body exercises too. Upper body is important. You want that whole body exercise. Doing some core exercises, which, like, I'm not a sit-up fan at all, but there's things you can do to stabilize your core, and even just standing on one foot is a strength exercise. So people can do that. They can do calf raises, standing on a step at home. So there's a lot of different things that you're going to work, and doing that, again, one set to start, and then 10 to 15 reps per set. Doing your major muscle group exercises, which, you know, when you break it down, you have our lower body push and pull. We have our upper body horizontal push and pull and vertical push and pull. Those are our 6 major movements, and then core stabilization and rotation. So you don't have to overthink it, but again, getting some specific advice. And it's hard for me, like right now, to say, okay, do X, Y, and Z. I mean, it's just like, it's a lot to go through. If people want more specifics, it's tough because I don't want to coach everybody on, because I can't see them. But then progressing to 3 sets. So say weeks, you're again, from Jane or Joe, going from the couch, say for 2 weeks, we do 1 set. Then for the next 4 weeks after that, we go up to 2 sets. And then after that, we've gone 6 weeks now. Let's get up to those 3 sets after 6 weeks. And we're going to try to be consistent with that over the course of time. And we're just trying to build that strength and endurance. And then the other thing to think about with that is recovery, as far as recovery between sets and specifically. So recovery in general, we're going to talk about, because I know you alluded to it, but yeah, when we're doing those sets, we're going to try to go pretty rapid between them. So we don't have like do a set of squats, then check our email, post something on Facebook, take a little selfie. No, we're here to work out. We're going to do the set 30 seconds to a minimum or a maximum of a minute rest in between before you go to the next thing. If you go from one exercise to another efficiently, that's what we want to do. Nobody has extra time in this life. So we want to be efficient between those exercises and get to the next one and then start over. Or if we're doing multiple sets of the same exercise, limit that recovery to 30 to 60 seconds and look at a clock, because what we think in our time is, oh, just a minute. It's probably 3. We're distracted. We see there's a TV on, we're watching Top 10 on ESPN or whatever. We're distracted by some other thoughts in life. So you got to be careful on that recovery. And then I mentioned standing on one leg. So doing some of these on single leg exercises, I'm a big fan of. So even for beginners, like you're doing bicep curls or overhead press. I mean, doing that on one leg is super beneficial because we only hike or climb on one leg at a time. We only run on one leg at a time. So having that stability on one leg is super important versus just always standing on 2 feet where we've got this big base of support. When we're out hiking or climbing, we're going to be working one leg at a time. And because you're on one leg, you shift your weight back and forth, and you want to have that stability.
That's super helpful. Yeah, I mean, so much information, and I was taking away notes, and I'm sure our audience were taking away notes too. But what I noted was anybody can get to a hike like a Dog Mountain in Oregon or Mount Si here within 3 to 4 months of training, basically.
For sure.
And you said you have to do 3 to 4 days of cardio, gradually take it a notch up, starting from 20 minutes, then 30 to 40 minutes, and gradually introduce weight. Start with just 5 pounds of weight, but also make sure the workouts that you're doing, you sort of mix up the intensity. Some of this is high, low intensity. Do some interval training as well. And thanks for some of those examples of strength training as well. It's super helpful. In the interest of time, now that you've already explained a lot of the concepts, right? If you were to, like, within 5 minutes, give us a plan for going from Si to the first mountain, just at a very high level, how many months should somebody train for? And what should their workout week look like for those many months to get there?
I'd actually say it's roughly this, the same timeline. If somebody's hiking, I think it's a Dog Mountain. Is that in Oregon?
Or Oregon, yeah.
All right, I believe you. I've never been to Dog Mountain. Yeah, so Dog Mountain or Mount Side, Tiger Mountain, Mailbox Peak, those type of things are I-90 corridor or Stevens Pass type hikes locally. Going up to like a Mount Baker or Mount St. Helens is the lowest volcano now. And so what I would say, getting up to a Mount St. Helens level hike, if somebody's able to hike Mount Si and feel pretty good up and down and not be completely wrecked the next day, they can basically next weekend go to Mount St. Helens and hike it quite literally, if it, with good conditions. From a fitness standpoint, I would think that'd be possible. It'd be a bigger day and they'd probably be more tired than Mount Si, of course, but it's not that much of a reach to get to that level. Going up to the next level of like Mount Baker or Mount Adams, which would be the next volcanoes to hit, I'd say you'd want to spend another, say, 3 months of focused hiking, progressing those hikes and progressing the weight you're carrying. So if you're just basically, I think of Mount Si as taking for a day pack, I mean, that's really all you need, depending on the time of year a little bit, but taking a day pack up, which is maybe 10 pounds, no big deal. But when you start progressing to Mount St. Helens, yeah, it's a step up because you're out in the deeper and there's more elements to deal with potentially. So you're gonna have a heavier pack, maybe 20, 25 pound pack on that, but not a huge deal, depending on the season, of course. In the winter, it's a bigger deal to be prepared for all sorts of circumstances. But I would say for the other hikes, including Mount Rainier, 3 to 4 months of solid, dedicated extra training. If you already have a solid base of that Mount Si type level hiking with good form, as far as good form, I mean, you're feeling good before, during, and down, up, down, and after. And as far as training sake, I want to get up to 5 days a week, and maybe that 6 day on occasion for sure too. And with that, we're going to have a primary base of cardio, but still having those, I mean, nothing really has to change on the strength side other than maybe the duration, adding a little bit more volume and dedication to that. So definitely trying to get that third day is always beneficial. 2 days you can certainly get by with because you don't have, like, if you just train 1 day a week, it's going to be tough to like really gain strength. You need at least 2 days a week to really start gaining strength versus just kind of barely holding on and maintaining it. Yeah. And with that, I mean, you might up your reps, up your sets, and just add some more complexity to that workout. A little more variability, but it's really doesn't have, there's no magic exercise. There's no one single magic exercise to get up Mount Rainier or to play basketball or to play football. It's all exercise is exercise. It's trying to get that strength in.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
The other things I would do, there's a couple different training modalities I would add in. So for one of the things I like to do is called high intensity continuous training. So the best place to do this is like on a spinning bike, and this is drudgery to the nth degree. So basically what we're gonna do with this technique, and I can explain it, to get on a spinning bike, you can also do it on, some ellipticals will let you do it too. You need to crank up the resistance super high. So like on a bike, like a spin style bike, you want to crank up the resistance. So you are mashing the pedals essentially like 30 to 40 RPMs, which is really slow for anybody who's familiar with indoor cycling or spinning. You're basically driving. It's almost like it's basically a long endurance strength training where you're jamming those pedals down, you're staying seated, you're able to continuously move, but it's a grind. And you're going to do that for a 10-minute bout and then do something else for 10 minutes, where it might just be walking that treadmill and go do that again for 10 minutes. And it's kind of, when I first did this technique, I learned it from a friend of mine named Joel Jameson. I was like, oh man, this is tough. It felt a lot like the upper portion of Rainier to me, where it's like, you take a step and it's effort, you take another step and it's effort. It's the same thing with these grind. And it's basically trying to work on your fast twitch muscles working more oxidatively, because It's something you can continuously do, but you need to really push through that. So it's a technique I like to use, and using that about once a week as part of one of your cardio things. And you do, starting out, do one bout, and then go do some just quote unquote normal cardio and some strength training, depending on the day, how you're breaking your workouts up. But then you eventually do a second bout, do 10 minutes, do something else for about 10 minutes, or come back, do another 10 minutes, that high intensity continuous training. And then eventually get a third time, maybe a fourth time in. And it will be really tough, and it's mentally challenging too to grind through something like that. But that's what you do when you're climbing those bigger mountains, because it's focused, continuous energy. You've done it. You're going usually on a summit day on like Rainier for 16 hours potentially. It's a long time. You got to keep your wits about you, and it's really mentally overcoming the physical aspects. And there's a mental toughness to mountaineering in particular, where you just have to keep going, and things are going to hurt. You're going to get a blister, and you're going to be cold. You're going to have cold hands, cold toes potentially.
Yeah.
Your backpack's going to be, something's going to be jabbing you in the back, and you just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And you might try to figure out fixes at times, but at points you just have to be tough and deal.
Yep. So somebody asked, what's the technique called again? It sounded to me like torture, Carl.
So high intensity continuous training, which abbreviates HICT. So, and so I learned it from Joel Jamieson, who trains a bunch of mixed martial artists actually, but he uses it in the conditioning for these guys who are working really hard for 3 minutes at a time and then stopping. But it's a great way to just work on the muscular endurance of your fast twitch muscle fibers.
Cool, fantastic, super helpful. In the interest of time, I'm just going to summarize this in try to do this in one line. Same plan as before, just another 3-4 months, but take everything up a notch basically. But also introduce the torture at least once a week, and then increase it to twice a week. But it's no rocket science. It's just taking everything up.
There's for exercise prescription, there's an art and a science to it. And I consider myself at least 51% artist when I do this stuff, because it's a little bit of gut feel. Because when I'm training people, I've met them, I've taken them through a battery of tests or seen them work out or know what their fitness level is. So then there's a bit of a gut feel like, yes, they can handle this. And I do that with my class too, as far as, yes, they can handle this. And, it's really, I don't do anything. It's really, the credit's those people that are doing the work. I point them in the right direction. I nudge them this way and that way, but it's really the people doing that hard work and sticking with it and being, like you mentioned earlier, consistency is one of the biggest things to success. You can't be like, oh, I'm going to work out for this week, then take a month off. It's not going to work.
Because that's all it took me, right? From couch to Rainier, just consistency. So the first 3-4 months, and then the next 3-4 months, and that's all it takes, that consistency basically, and one step at a time, not to try to do something crazy. And you learn about your own body as you're doing it.
For sure.
Look at people and you learn about them. So Carl, we've got just 10 minutes to go. I'm going to take some questions, and I have one pressing question that I want to definitely ask before we wrap up as well. So some of the questions that we had was, what is going to be your recommendation for training in a place with low elevation mountains for eventually climbing Rainier? So I think to just generalize the question, it's about how do you train for altitude?
Altitude is tough.
Or elevation, sorry. Elevation.
Okay. Altitude, wear a mask. So a couple of different things. So, I mean, if you're Florida, it would be the worst, but you're looking for staircases or the machines that would be the best. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the step mill, which is the rotating stairs. That's my go-to for my general fitness for myself and what I put a lot of people on. And then as far as in those areas, I'm not a huge fan in general here in Washington, where we do have hikes available, of wearing packs on machines. You can definitely do it, but really I tend to leave that out on the trails. But there's times where it's not bad, because it does, I mean, it's kind of a give and take. Just doing it every time, I don't think is necessary. Once a week, or maybe twice, if you're not getting out for a hike, is fine. But if you're in a low elevation place where you're in Florida, for argument's sake, yeah, you're going to get on a step mill and you're going to put a backpack on because you want that load on your frame too, and getting used to that. And trying to do that with, you don't want a death grip on the machine either. And for anybody treadmilling, again, I'm going to get on a soapbox here. If you're on a treadmill at, say, it goes to 15% grade or whatever, and you're holding on and walking, you're basically saying that I'm going to have a team of sled dogs pulling me up the mountain. Because when you're holding on at 15% grade, you're just nullified the grade altogether. You can't hold on to the treadmill. If you're going to fall or something, yeah, sure, reach out and hold on or grab so you don't fall. But if you're holding on the treadmill and walking uphill, you've completely negated the grade. So never do that, except for safety reasons to fall. But yeah, that's so don't do that. That's a no-no. But yeah, you're going to use step mill, graded treadmill, and then using that backpack in those circumstances in low elevation.
So that's a good segue to my question. So I'm going to ask that. In today's world, when, yes, the gyms are opening up at limited capacity, but those of us who are still not comfortable going back into the gym or don't have access to all that equipment, don't have like a stair mill or step mill, or even, a treadmill for that matter, what is your recommendation or any other equipment? So in today's world, where we don't have access to gyms, how do you recommend that we train, whether it is strength training, whether it's a high intensity, how can we have that set up at home?
Usually running is our natural thing for humans. So walking and then running to add intensity, or going uphill for intensity as far as not being in a gym. I mean, obviously people have to make that investment if they're going to buy a machine. So the most common are bikes and treadmills, and then ellipticals are the three most common home machines as far as I know, along with then dumbbells. It's not too difficult to get, some dumbbells and a couple of like scry bands, or, the big tubing bands with the handles on them. You can do so much with those. I mean, for the last year, pretty much, I've been teaching my class with little other than that in body weight and gravity. And I haven't taught the same class twice. And I haven't taught the same class twice in 16 years. And so variability is there, but you can do a lot with dumbbells, bands, and body weight from a strength standpoint. And then for cardio, I mean, unless there's a musculoskeletal limitation, and sometimes people do, whether it's plantar fasciitis or something where they're not great at running, you can progress in your running, assuming no injuries. But running is a great thing to do. But then also there's always be wary of too much of anything. But running, I usually limit people to 3 days a week of actual running, going walking, or trying to find another modality. Investing in a bike for at home is a great investment because you can always run outside. Gravity's good everywhere, so you can usually do that just about anywhere. But it's tough, but
absolutely. Yeah, no, super helpful. And how, I'm now curious, because I haven't been, because of the startup and just been so busy, I haven't been doing this class. I need to get back to it. But how has the mountain conditioning, the famous mountain conditioning class, evolved? How are you doing your classes now? Now that are people, is the gym open? Are people coming to the gym? How's the
so I'm super fortunate. Pro Club, for those who aren't familiar with Pro Club, it's basically the largest single health club in the country. Our facility is 360,000 square feet. And that's a lot of different elements, from our spa or locker rooms to fitness areas, et cetera. But we have the square footage at 25% capacity, which is the limit in Washington State. We're fine. And we're a super clean facility. We've always been that, but we have extra air filters that we put in before COVID. And then we've always been clean. We have our machines custom made in white to prove that we're clean. So it's just what we've always done. So it's a really safe environment. So, but a lot of clubs are hurting. And I mean, I can't remember the stat, but I think it's something like 26% of clubs they're gone, they're done forever. And it's kind of similar to like restaurants. It's just this hard thing that a lot of businesses are going out of business. We're going to hold on, hopefully, and survive, but it's tough. Mountain conditioning wise, what I've been doing during the original shutdown in March, we kind of changed the time a little bit, but I was teaching a class in my garage, and I was talking to my laptop at 6 a.m, and it was really weird. And because I didn't have any feedback because it was on Facebook Live, I would just be doing a workout and everybody's following me and was watching me, or just watching me work out. Eventually, we got back to be able to do when did we start in-person classes? I forget. We had in-person for a while, then it got shut down again. So then it's just online. And right now it's a hybrid. So I'm allowed X number of people based on the room. I think it's technically 21, but that feels a little full. I think we've been more in the 12 range, which is great. And we could probably go to 15 and still feel really well spaced and comfortable because it's a 3,000 square foot room. And then there's several people, a couple dozen that are online, I think, or not quite a couple dozen, but a dozen and a half. So it's
as well as in classroom right now.
At the same time.
That's brilliant. That's great. Because I mean, that makes such a big difference because I just can't work out by myself to have
and it's fun. It's kind of, again, it provides a challenge for me professionally, but I'm coaching those here, like kind of off in the periphery. And then there's the camera and the little displays I'm looking at. I'm watching people and coaching them up at home and seeing them get attacked by their dogs and cats. And, but I'm able to coach them, even though they're the 2-inch squares, and whether it's just, add a little bit more range of motion or move this way, that way, giving them coaching things along the way, which is what I do in person too. So it's worked pretty well. And everything I'm doing, I am limited to compared to what I used to be able to do with more physical options, as far as we do some more cardio and things in different ways with machines and have more strength options. So I'm basically doing the whole class more or less with dumbbells. Occasionally we use a stability ball, but pretty moderate investment. I actually put something together with one of our vendors so people get the setup for roughly $200 to get some, I think 3 sets of dumbbells, some bands, and a stability ball. It was really reasonably done. So a few people took me up on that, and I set that up for them. But so with some dumbbells, or even people doing makeshift things. I've had people use wine bottles for weights and other things, and it's like, that's fine.
Yeah, because there was a time when dumbbells were not even available. I think we have time for one last question. Carl, the question is, how do they get more information about Pro Club's mountain hiking program? Is it compulsory to have hiking experience to join the climb? I think the question is more about the climb, because you mentioned that you were.
Oh, right. So
here.
We pushed, so it's a pretty limited thing. We're only having 7 of our members join the climb. So we were gonna have one of our other trainers. She moved on to something else, go with the climb last year than it would be now this year. So I'm gonna climb with our 7 people again, although I just had one person drop out. So we're gonna open that one spot up to our members first to join that climb. But if that doesn't fill, I think I'm sure I could figure out a way to open up somebody else. But I'm sure somebody from we've got a pretty good membership base. So I'm sure somebody's going to want to jump in that spot because it's such a high demand thing. But then, like, from a standpoint for our members, we do a first hike of the month, or excuse me, first Friday hike of the month. My boss, Josh, actually leads that. So that's free. We basically just a meet up for a group to hike. And, it's usually just a handful of people, and they go to various places, and Josh sets those up to do those hikes. But then that's about it. I mean, we just don't do a ton of it. And quite frankly, it's done for having that cool experience for our members. So it's not really done to make money.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. And we'll send out all of some of this information in a follow-up email that we do. I think with that, it's time to announce the winner who gets a free taster class with you. And just for everybody, Carl was feeling generous just when he...
For his birthday.
Yeah, because it's my birthday. He said, we'll do 5 taster sessions. So, hey, Spencer, are you still there? Did we pick like 5 people who signed up and who attended, who can get Carl's free taster class next week? Thanks, Kanika. Or I have the list here. We're working on Slack simultaneously. So we have Mila. You get a free taster class.
Go, Mila.
We got Elisa. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing the last name right. It's Korinke. And Murali gets a free taster class. Murali's done this class before.
Wow.
I think she's just using random numbers to pick people who signed up.
That's good.
this Jamie Perto. I don't have a full name, but Jamie, congratulations, and Tarangini. So these are the 5 people who get a free taster class with Carl next week. Murli, since you already know this class, if you'd like to give it away to somebody else, you're welcome to. But if you still want to go ahead and attend the class and see your old buddies, you won it, so you're still welcome to do that. But
I can only do it virtually anyway. I'm glad to give it to someone else who can really make use of it. Perfect. I have done this multiple times and I have climbed all these mountains. So
awesome. And Murli climbed with us 2 years ago, right?
Yes. So I did mountain conditioning class under Carl in 2019. And then I also climbed Mount Rainier through Pro Club's climbing program. It was a great experience indeed.
Excellent.
I really enjoyed. Yeah, I wanted to tell that, but so.
It came up, so.
Yep. I also climbed the other 3 mountains the same year, Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams, Mount Baker, and then at last Mount Rainier. So it was all Pro Clubs training, mountain conditioning. And I also did personal training for a few hours. One of Carl's assistants actually helped me to have a weekly 1 hour for about 6 weeks. So I did a personal training under one of the trainers in Pro Club. So they helped me to do this strength training with the trainer for 6 weeks.
I'm yet to come across somebody who doesn't have nice things to say about Carl. And he's like, in all my hiking circles, mountain conditioning, Carl's mountain conditioning is like the secret that gets whispered around. So everybody absolutely, loves this class. And once you attend, you're just hooked because you can immediately see the benefits of his class. So thank you so much, Carl. Really appreciate you making the time. And
hopefully it's helpful for everybody. And I know it's hard to get into the exact specifics for everybody, but hopefully it gave some structure and ideas to think about and help everybody get out more and get stronger in the mountains.
Definitely. And I think with all those steps and tips, if you still have mountain goals, and I know that the big climbing companies have very limited spots this year, if you're still looking to find a community and train, we do have the beginner climbs, Mount Baker, Mount Adams, and stuff like, Mount Shuksan that you can book on AdventureTripr. It is with the local guides that we work out these climbs, and they hold spots for us. So feel free to check it out. And in our community, we kind of provide with the training plan and also education around how to pack, what gear to get. So all of that coaching and guidance will be available. And hopefully we can bring Carl to talk to people about, training and training plans as well for those who sign up with us. So yeah, please go check us out. This is when gyms, us like the small businesses need all your support. So thank you so much for supporting us so far. And thanks for joining the event. Thanks everyone. And we'll send out a link to this recording. Thanks for joining and hope to see you in our future events. Thank you. Thanks Carl.
Preeti. Yeah, be well.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye guys. Thanks
for joining.
Thanks, Murli. Bye, Mila. Congratulations, Mila. Thanks, Anik, for joining. Jen, thank you so much.
Keep in mind to make sure you find somebody to take that, Preeti.
Are you sure you want to give it away, Murli?
Yes.
Anik, do you want to take it? Are you still there, Anik? Oh, there you go. You're on mute, Anik. Unmute yourself. Do you want to take Murli? Because I know Anik wants to climb all these mountains. She's the one who asked the question, Carl, what if you're in low elevation place? How do we? So for asking that fantastic question, you get that spot that Murli is very generous.
It was a great question and completely reasonable one.
He deserves it.
Thank you, Murli. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Awesome. Bye. Take care.
Right. See ya.
Thank you so much.
What's that, Anik?
Thank you so much. It was really interesting, actually.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it. I have no idea what people think.
No, I think it was really good. I mean, there is a lot of people who want to climb, and we don't always know where to start. And And it's good to know you can start like by walking 1 mile beside your house.
For sure.
I mean, no, that was cool.
Great. Glad you enjoyed it.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye. Have a good evening.
Happy birthday.
Everyone. Yeah, thank you, Mike. Bye.
Happy birthday, Brady.
Thanks, Carl.